after this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where is he? Join later. So let's start. Okay. There is, there is one additional. Maybe you can turn your.
Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? It is now on balance. I leave. No, it was 2 and 2 now.
Okay, let's let's start our next session. Welcome. Our next session will focus on radical collaboration of all climate actors for a regenerative world, providing nourishing life to all. This is very important for us and fostered by shared value. And we focus on these three core values I keep on repeating: caring, sharing, and daring. Radical collaboration is absolutely needed. In the session before, it was also highlighted that unless you are able to bridge and connect different pieces of the puzzle, it will be extremely challenging to address global issue, such as climate and sustainability. This is because you need to see the interaction between different issues and have an integrated approach to address them. We have several stakeholders that are relevant to climate action. We have the public sector, government, national level, and at the local level. We have the private sector playing a very important role. And then we have also citizens that are consumers and that are part of the civil society, that are also voters, that are also playing a very important role. So first, the private sector. The private sector is critical because we did not shift from horse to car by putting tax on horses. There was a need to innovate and have the car design, and there was also the need to invest and finance their upscale deployment. Now, investing and financing are the role of the private sector. So it appears then very clearly that you cannot change if you do not have the private sector on board. It has a very important role to play. At three levels, the private sector is innovating, the private sector is financing, and the private sector is also implementing the projects that are needed to make the transition toward a green economy. But the private sector alone will not be able to make the transition. It has to be enabled by other entities, particularly the public sector. The public sector needs to put in place the regulatory policy framework. It has also to support by putting in place incentive for investment in green activities. So the public sector will need to, for example, de-risk project that otherwise will not be attractive for the private sector. Citizens have also, as consumer, a role to play. They can contribute in creating a market demand for the green products that are needed. They can also accept to pay a premium to facilitate the large-scale deployment of these green products. So private sector, public sector, individual citizen, they all have a role to play. So it means that radical collaboration between these different entities will be needed. And on top of that, you have also philanthropy that can play a very important role by providing catalytic investment or seed capital to make things happen. So to discuss all that, how can we create a space for radical collaboration among all these different entities? We have a panel of very distinguished experts that will intervene on this different topic. Katarina Selada, Head of Policy and Intelligence Unit, Center for Engineering and Development. And then we have Anna Stanley Rajer, Director, Climate Transparency and member of the WBSCD Extended Leadership Group. And then we have Mike Heiss, Climate Change and Decarbonization Leader, Global Head of Renewable Energy, KPMG International. And then we have Jean-Claude Bergelman, Director of the Frontier Planet Prize and former Head of Open Science Unit, European Commission. And finally, we have also Jean-Pierre Elong Mbassi, Secretary General, UCLG Africa, which is dealing with local authority. So I will start by asking each of you to make an opening statement on this topic before we move to question and answer session. So maybe starting with you, Catalina.
Okay. So on behalf of CEIA, which is a Portuguese Technology and Innovation Center, it is my pleasure to participate in this session, so thanks very much for the invitation. So I will focus this initial presentation in three main messages. So the first message, we strongly believe in the role of technology and digital innovation to accelerate the transition to climate-neutral cities and also to advance the sustainable development goals at the local level. However, technology is not enough. We need transformative and integrated climate solutions, which requires co-innovation on business models, on policies and governance systems, on financial instruments, and schemes to promote behavior change. So we are talking about social-technical innovation, which implies a strong collaboration between all the climate actors. I would like to give you an example of a human-centered climate innovation solution that we are developing and testing in Portugal, which is a sustainability platform called AIR. This platform is the first one that assigns a value to sustainable behaviors, putting citizens at the center of climate action. This platform was awarded in 2021 with the new European Bauhaus Prize by the European Commission, and it was also one of the 10 successful applicants to the Google Org Impact Challenge on Climate. So this platform quantifies in real time carbon emissions avoided by a citizen using a sustainable mobility mode, making their contribution to the decarbonization process visible and tangible. So in fact, we are empowering citizens to fight against climate change. So my second message is about climate education. So to achieve carbon neutrality, we need to actively involve and empower the young generations, young people. In fact, we strongly believe that climate education is a powerful tool to promote social transformation. That's why in Portugal we are working with students and local schools, promoting environmental awareness and literacy, and also promoting sustainable behaviors. And to achieve this objective, we are using, of course, technology and digital innovation, but also arts and culture, in line with the European Bauhaus movement of the European Commission. Our ambition is, in fact, to create a social movement led by young people by the young generations as actionists. So we believe that they can act as change makers, inspiring their friends, their families, and the community to reduce carbon emissions and to adopt sustainable behaviors. In the next round of questions, I would like to present, if possible, a project that we are developing in Portugal, and that was awarded as the most inspiring Education for Climate project in Europe last October. So my third message is about cities. So we need to integrate local climate action into national climate plans. And in fact, cities are very important actors in this green transition, contributing also to ensuring social justice and equity. So national governments should better include urban areas in their NDCs, the idea of localizing NDCs. So besides a global stocktake, I think we need also a local stocktake, which implies, of course, the involvement of all the local climate actors. Just to sum up, I think we need to include unusual climate actors in this policy debate. So micro-scale projects, small-scale entities matter, and they can make a difference in this battle against climate change because they can be replicated and then they can be scaled up all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of very interesting point. We need to have an integrated approach to climate action. It's not just about technology, but it's also about innovative business model, innovative policies, innovative cooperative approach, and very important innovative product from the culture and creative industry. But as you have mentioned, it's also about art and culture as a very important lever. And multi-level action, integration between what is happening at the national level and at the local level, and also integration with what is happening at the sectoral level. Because in many countries, what we see is you have a longer-term low-emission development strategy, but that is not aligned with the sectoral strategy that are implemented in the energy sector or in the agriculture sector and things like that. So thank you so much. Next, Anna.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'd like to talk a little bit about data, so complementing a little bit what you spoke about. And in the previous panel, we already heard about the poly crisis and the fact that we really aren't on track as sort of a global population to avoid the global tipping points or reaching the global tipping points. 5 of the global 16 tipping points are at risk at 1.5 degrees, and we are quickly on the highway in that direction, not knowing the consequences of what's going to happen if we get there. one of the reasons, or one of the things that we see at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the WBCSD, as one of the sort of key causing factors for a lack of progress is that there's an increasing misalignment between the economies, finance, regulation, and incentives. And people and planet really need to be at the heart of transformations. But today, if you look around at what sort of business is doing in its role to accelerate the transition, business very clearly is not on track. Accenture released a report just a couple of days ago where they surveyed or looked at sort of 2,000 of the world's largest companies to look at where they are on their climate journey, their net zero journeys, and what they're actually doing. And whilst we see an increase in set targets compared to last year, with 37% of targets being set versus 34% last year, there are 1 in 5 companies that actually cannot or are not on track to meet their 2050 goals. So what's needed really is a system reset and finding a way to help align these different parts of the system, the business world and the financial world, to make sure that everyone's working together in the same direction. And this is not about compliance, this is about creating accountability. There's more and more happening, helping or pushing business towards creating accountability. Last year, the high-level expert group, they made recommendations around what needs to be done to create more accountability. And we're seeing many different standards emerging, pushing companies to disclose more data, especially on their supply chains. And climate really needs to be integrated, or climate-related data really needs to be integrated into what companies are doing at every step along the way. But not just for the sake of data, for the sake of reporting, but in a way that the capital markets can understand and really use this data in a practical way to make decisions about where they allocate their capital. And today this is not happening. The data that is being put into the capital markets is not comparable. It doesn't actually include information on transition risk and supply chains. I don't know how many of you come from the business world here today, but how many of you, if you do, have actually mapped your risks in a local context across the whole world for all your different supply chains, understanding what's going to happen if there's a flood, if there's a heat wave, and what that actually means in practice, not just in terms of the risk of lives and sort of loss of income, but actually more long-term for the viability of your business. So there needs to be a significant change in how data is brought to the conversation. Data needs to be looked at more from the perspective of how financial data is looked at in the flow of how businesses operate and the different steps and sort of the baselining, looking at real primary data and not just secondary data, which many companies use today, but then also using that as you make decisions in your business in a way like you're using financial data today. So at WBCSD, we call that the CPAS, the Corporate Performance and Accountability System. I'm sure if you come across WBCSD in the next couple of days, you'll hear a lot about that. But it's really around aligning the system's performance and accountability between business and finance and also the policy world. And coming back to what you said in your opening statement about sort of sharing, caring, or sharing, daring, and caring, no, sharing, caring, and daring, caring, sharing, whatever around we put those words, and the collaboration that's needed, all the different people in the system need to come together to find ways to standardize the data that's shared, to standardize how that data is accessed, and then also to standardize how that data is used. So thank you very much for having me today, but I really look forward to the discussion further on this.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of thought. Currently, what we have is a misaligned system, finance, regulation, and business. And all these things need to be aligned. That's very important. And one important point, we need to have data that can inform and inspire action. And not average data, but primary data, yes, where it is possible.
Primary data, standardized data.
Yeah, and standardized data. So next is Mike.
So thank you, Samba. Normally, when I'm with you, I talk about the innovation agenda, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I want to pick up on a theme that came through loud and clear in the last session about consumers, or the word that I prefer to use is citizens. And I think a much, much greater focus on what consumers and citizens can do to drive this agenda will unlock a lot of the points the two previous speakers and you spoke about. So for me, Masamba, there are 5 different things consumers can do, and we're not paying enough attention to these things. One, there was a discussion in the first session about products. I talk about what we consume, what we eat, what we buy. If consumers can really think about the greenness, the carbon intensity, the carbon journey that those products and services entail, that's just the first step. The second step is transport. How, I think, it's fantastic here at COP28, the public service. I took the train this morning. If we can really start altering our behavior around transport, think about, and I know we're all very conscious of flying here to Dubai, think about the way in which we travel. It doesn't mean you need to change everything, but if you start in degrees changing your behavior, and I really like the point you made about next gen, they are going to be the secret to unlocking this. The third area, and again I think that one of the previous speakers spoke about this, energy efficiency, energy demand in the home. Simple, very simple things that we as consumers can do if we just adopt this agenda into our daily lives. And the previous speaker spoke about sort of some of the capital investment you need to make in 15-year return. That's great. I just say switch off the bloody lights. Start making an effort. It does make a difference, and I'm sure many of you have seen the studies. If we can crack the energy efficiency part of this equation, we would, irrespective of everything else we do with renewables and direct air capture and industrial decarbonisation, energy efficiency can make a real difference. There are two more. How we invest as individuals will make a real difference. Most people in this world have some pension funds and have at least some influence over their pension funds. If citizens really start doing something with their pension funds, it doesn't mean that you need to take very risky investments. There are lots of green products and investment opportunities in the world today. I would really encourage consumers and citizens to think about that. And last, and I'm going to link this back now to the rest of the agenda. Last, we keep talking about government, and I have to admit, Masamba, I get frustrated at the way people always look to government to be the solution to this crisis, and this is a crisis. How we vote as citizens will make a real difference. We get the governments that we vote for, and we should not forget that. So they, for me, are the 5 fundamental things that we as citizens can do. How we get citizens to go from where they are today, that for me is the real challenge. But why am I focusing on citizens? If you focus on citizens, what's going to happen with the other actors that you spoke about? First of all, you correctly made a very good analysis of the powerful role the private sector can make. Let's be very clear about one thing. The private sector, it may have a purpose, it may have SBTI or other types of net zero targets. It is still today driven by profit. We should never forget that. What will make business change? It's consumers changing what they buy. Once that starts to happen, businesses will react. And I want to kill one other myth. And this is a personal view, obviously, and others may disagree. There is no such thing as a green premium. What there is, and what businesses are starting to recognize, is that it's not so much a green premium. If you have a green product, you will actually get much greater uptake. And we are seeing evidence of that in the marketplace. So by focusing on the citizen, you start to change how the private sector reacts. In turn, and I want to bring this back to sort of our shared interest, Masamba, the innovation agenda. If business is going to react to producing new types of products, what do we think that's going to do? It's going to drive innovation. It's going to help the piece that you're so passionate about, driving the demand side. The innovators are out there. They need a lot of help, but it can help. And then I bring in the public sector. The public sector, and particularly governments, I go back to my point about voting, they will react to all of this, and I'm a passionate believer in the power of policies. I'm witnessing today the impact of policies like the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, hugely controversial, but my God, it's making a difference. And I have to sit back and admire the EU Commission and Ursula von der Leyen for the proactive steps they're taking. They're taking on renewables, they're taking on CBAM, they're taking with this deforestation directive. This is really driving change. So if we use citizens to drive the type of politicians that we want, then for me, that's how we get to a point where we can start driving some of this agenda. And again, I go back to the next gen. I mean, in KPMG, this is no longer about giving a voice to the next gen. This is about actively involving them in the decision making. And that is a pretty fundamental change for us as an organization that we're making. So thank you, Masamba.
Thank you, Mike. No, very clear that the regenerative world that we want to build will need all these actors acting in an integrated manner. The consumer, individual citizen pulling, the government through its policy and regulatory framework pushing, and then innovation, because innovation is one of the things that will make things possible with financing. So, and I agree with you that individual citizen consumer have a very, very important role to play if they have the solution. Because for the consumer to shift to another solution, the solutions need first to exist. It's why innovation, in our view, is extremely important. And we need transparency. I think both of them, they talk about data as a need to have transparency so that citizens can make informed decisions when they are consuming. And finally, we need awareness. And this is why products from the culture and creative industry are very, very important. Because you can have a good alternative, but people are not willing to adopt it. Like meat produced from laboratory, I'm expecting that it will face some issue of adoption. But definitely, consumers are key player in this ecosystem to make the transition to the regenerative world we are contemplating possible. Next, I will give the floor to Jean-Claude. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Does it work? Okay, thank you, Masamba, for giving me the floor and first of all for inviting us here. So I will focus on the role of science in all this because I'm the director of the Frontiers Planet Prize, which is a new prize created by the Frontiers Research Foundation 2 years ago, which is limited in ambition but very focused and at the same time very ambitious. So we want to stimulate the global science system to come up with more solutions. So it is not trying to redress the whole picture, but really focusing on what can science do here in order to come up with solutions, because we think that there is quite enough science in documenting the problem, and there are extremely good models and scientists around that tell us exactly what goes on and what shouldn't go on, but we do think that there is not enough solutions being proposed by science because we simply don't have the time. And that's what we are focusing on, and I come back to that in a second. So I think we all agree, and we don't need to convince anyone here that what we are facing is not an incremental innovation. We're just going to lower the thermostat a little bit from 1.5 to 1 degree, and the problem is solved. We really need a kind of a systemic re-engineering of what we are doing in terms of production, living, energy, retail, food system, and so on. And in itself, that's a gigantic challenge, but at the same time, it's not unique, you know. In the history of the last 300 years, our societies re-engineered themselves 5 times. We re-engineered ourselves into an agricultural society, into a pre-industrial and industrial, and the last re-engineering, the 5th one, is the digital one. So every time what we saw happening is the same pattern. New technologies induce new business models, induce new partners, new ways of doing things, and that leads to a new dynamic which is of a higher sophistication as the previous one. As you wrote yourself, Masamba, the horse didn't disappear because we taxed him or we killed him, but we invented a car which is much more easy to use for everything. Well, that's exactly the same pattern that we see now. And what we have as ambition there is precisely this: how can we re-engineer our societies into what we call then a green renaissance? We have to rethink it. So not go back to something or throw it away, but rethink what we do, but in a healthy way. And that's where we think that the role of science is essential and a little bit, my personal feeling there, overlooked there. Because and that's actually the caring, re-engineering into a green renaissance, to use your 3 words. Now, because why? First of all, if you look at these transitions, what are the key elements that come back all the time? First of all, you need a very good narrative. Harari wrote a brilliant book about how narratives glue societies and go from system 1 to system 2. You don't go from system 1 to system 2 just based on facts. You need a kind of an attractive narrative for businesses, for people, for policy. And that's what we think the green renaissance is. Secondly, you need consistent policy. What you just said, what the Commission is doing, European Commission where I work, they create a consistent policy. I personally think that in the recent discussions that, okay, let's give up 1.5, we go to 2 degrees as an acceptable or as an inevitable target, I think it's a big mistake, because then the next thing is, okay, then we go to 2.5. 1.5 is essential, the science is clear, we should not trespass it, we should stick to it, because if you change the rules of the game will change whilst you're playing. And then thirdly, what we learn in all these transitions, and that's where science comes in, it's always new ideas that bring new technologies, new procedures. And where do most new ideas come from? And where do the most radical ideas come? That is quite often, they are initiated in the world of science. And that's the daring. We need to care, but we also need to dare more. And it's not by being incremental that you solve a system re-engineering, but by being fundamental and radical. And we think that is the key DNA of a scientist, being very risky there. So, and then the last part I think is we need to accelerate all this, because that's why we created the prize. Why do we need to accelerate? You know, these systemic transitions, they follow. They follow. That's, sorry. You want to say something? No. These systemic transitions, they follow the same pattern. It's always 35, 40 years that you need to go from one system of re-engineering to the second one. Unfortunately, so I do think like Kerry said, the American ex-vice president said in our conference, we will get there, but we don't have the time to follow the normal pattern of 35 years. So we need to accelerate it. And how do you accelerate things? Well, by sharing and by making sure a maximum of people, of actors, of scientists can take part in it. And that's why we push so much for open science. I really think that we should not be complacent and say, okay, the normal way of doing business in the world of innovation will get us there. No, we need a new paradigm there, and that's the open paradigm, be it in innovation and be it in science, because that's where everyone comes together. That's the easiest way to mobilize the maximum of our talents in the world. So we need to care, green renaissance, we need to dare, take risks, and we need to share to get there.
Thank you so much. I completely agree with you. We are completely aligned, and this is very refreshing to see that this vision of caring, sharing, and daring is being more and more shared. I was at the World Green Economic Summit, but there was many ministers that take ownership of that and say that this is also their vision. This is how they see things moving forward. And I agree with all you have said. Science make possible things, and then you need a narrative to make it acceptable, and you need policy, business model to make things also viable. But all these things need to be with the mindset, caring, sharing, daring. Thank you so much. Now I will move to the last speaker, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you, Masamba, and I'm pleased to be here. I represent the 16,000 local governments of Africa gathered in what we call the United Cities and Local Governments of Africa, UCLG Africa. We are based in Morocco, and we maintain 5 regional offices, one in Cairo for North Africa, one in Accra for West Africa, one in Libreville for Central Africa, Nairobi for East Africa, and Pretoria for Southern Africa. So we call ourselves the African Union of Local Governments. Well, let me say that I really like what you said, and let's say your motto. You know? Caring, sharing, and daring. But let me also confess that aligning these 3 mission goals is not an easy task. And let me borrow from our colleague in the previous panel, who said something very interesting. Yes. you said this. You said scientists, researchers, planners have a long-term view on the way to build a regenerative, green, and low-carbon world. This is what you said, long-term view. Then you say public authorities, particularly the politicians, have as horizon the next election. And then you added that the private sector is guided by the short-term return on investment of their shareholders. So you see, the final mile is the people that want a sustainable, decent human life forever. So our first challenge here is to align the time horizons of these different actors. And I can tell you that the bad news is that those who have the mission to try and align these different horizons and different interests are also demonized, because this is the mission of the public authorities. These are the ones that are tasked by the others to try and align the different interests. But the public authority bashing is the sport of the day. And I'm coming from Africa. In Africa, because of the structural adjustment that we endure for now 50 years, almost, the horizon of our public authorities is the appointment, the quarterly appointment of the IMF and the World Bank missions. The long term have long disappeared from the horizon. And you see, if at all the public authorities don't act to reconcile these different interests and the different time horizons, then you end up not able to align caring, sharing, and daring. My second contribution here is that let's take one by one, sharing. Sharing is the consequence of caring. If you don't care, you can't share. But what we encounter the most is that people want intellectual protection of their properties. So sharing is something that is very difficult today, because when I have a knowledge, I protect it, and I don't want to share. So when we say disseminate experience, disseminate information, well, it's wishful thinking. It is not the reality. The reality is that the private sector or the researchers are going to license their property, intellectual property, and will not share unless they know that they are going to earn a lot of money out of it. That's it. So sharing is not that evident. Now, let's come to daring. You are right. You need to invent. You need to think differently. And we relate to what Schumpeter called a destructive disruption. But at the same time, as I said, the intellectual property is a limitation of this. And what I want to also do here is to know what kind of innovation can be inspirational. Is it the innovation pushed by the market? Or is it the innovation pushed by the social demands? It's a totally different ballgame. I leave it to your wisdom to choose, but mine is that in Africa, for example, we have a huge demand on research. Why? Because all the technological packages that we use in managing our cities, for example, cannot work. In cities with 5% growth, for example, Lagos add 500,000 people per year in a city. Who can plan this? Kinshasa, as an extension of Lebanon, do you think that you can have a centralized sewage system that can serve the whole of the population of Kinshasa? Or do you think you have to condemn Kinshasa to don't have a real sanitation system because they cannot put in place a sewage system that is centralized? So we need serious research here. But who's funding this? Is it caring, sharing, and daring? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this very interesting perspective. And I agree with you that implementing this vision of caring, sharing, and daring is not something easy. But this is possible. And as I have mentioned, we should not set our goal and target based on our perception of what is possible, but based on what is needed. We know that this is what is needed to address the global challenge that we are facing. I know that we do not have the complete solution, but we have some ideas on how this could be operationalized. One thing is, first, we need to move away from this understanding that we can be independent and strive for interdependency and collaboration. Because independence means competition, whereas interdependency means collaboration. We need also to have self-awareness and awareness of others, and be able to value the contribution of others and link it to our own goal and our own objective. Otherwise, we will not see the value of collaboration. The value of collaboration can come out if we know that without the contribution of others, I will not be able to achieve my own goal. And this is why this systemic thinking is important. And we need to promote system awareness so that people can see the linkage between the different issues, the linkage between my objective and your objective, and why we should sit and work together so that we can achieve both our objectives. It means that we need to come up with new innovative business models that are able to create value addition for entities that do not necessarily have the same interest. Some of them working for the longer term horizon, others working for the short term horizon, but still being able to create value for each of them. Very important point, and I agree that this is something that we need to further work on and learn together, because it's a big challenge. Coming back now to my first speaker, you mentioned one climate project, climate education project.
Yeah.
yeah, I will be very happy to learn more about it.
Okay, so yes, I would like to briefly present our project. It is a education for climate project that we are developing and implementing in the city of Matosinhos, in the north of Portugal, in collaboration with the municipality and with public local schools. So, and it is important to say that it's not about climate activism, but it is about climate actionism, because in fact we are involving young people in acting, in solving local problems and local challenges. So, around 80 students and teachers are using our AIR app, which in fact is the user interface of our AIR platform, which quantifies in real time carbon emissions avoided by students using a sustainable mobility mode. So this quantification makes the contribution of the school community to the decarbonization of the city where they live visible and tangible. So we are empowering young people to fight against climate change. But we are also involving young people in the decision-making process, because this was in fact a collaborative and deliberative process. Students quantified their mobility carbon footprint, they established carbon emission reduction targets, and they defined a local carbon price, which was very, very interesting. Then the value of avoided carbon emissions was converted into tokens, into digital credits, using our AIR platform. And students challenged the city council to monetize these tokens and to finance a green project in the school environment. So cities should recognize the contribution of students, of young people to the decarbonization of the cities. And it was very interesting because students preferred to be rewarded as a result of their collective action and not as a result of their individual effort. I think we have here a transition from a I economy to a we economy. So we are replicating this project in other cities in Portugal with 25 schools, and also in a city in Brazil, the city of Itajaí in the state of Santa Catarina. And our idea is to replicate this project involving more schools, more cities, and more countries in this social movement towards sustainability led by the young generations.
Thank you so much. I would like now to use the last 5 minutes to collect recommendation from you. The issue we are trying to address, the challenge that we are trying to address within the Global Innovation Hub is huge. It's not just about decarbonization, but this is about providing flourishing life to the many people in a healthy planet, which is a different story and an objective that is much difficult to achieve. So we are promoting this caring, sharing, and daring, and I agree with Jean-Pierre. This is something that is very, very difficult to achieve. So your recommendation, what would you recommend the Global Innovation Hub to do to progress in that direction? Who would like to start?
Yeah,
Mike?
I wish we had much longer, Masamba, because there's just loads of interesting points. I'm actually inspired by listening to your story, and I think, in fact, I can tell just very briefly, I can tell you a similar story. KPMG is working with an organization in France called Climate Dividends, and it's an entirely new concept where you mentioned avoided emissions. It's a way of recognizing avoided emissions on the balance sheet so that investors who are then investing in the company, they see a financial dividend, but they also see a climate dividend. So we're really motoring around the concept of impact and recognizing impact. I think, Masamba, I think the Global Innovation Hub is a brilliant concept, and I think what you're doing is great. I think the more we can do to help the various actors understand and measure impact. If you can measure impact and put a value on impact, then that in turn drives change. So yes, the theme of this session is around caring, sharing and daring. My challenge is how do you make that happen? And I happen to agree with what Jean-Pierre said. You need to create a little bit of self-interest as well. You know, and I represent the private sector, but I know how private sector thinks. They think in terms of what's good for them, and they will do the caring, sharing and daring if it makes sense. So that's why, you know, we have this concept, as you know, called beyond value chain mitigation in SBTI. It's a brilliant concept. Companies will do it if they find that the impact is not only measured, but that it's recognized. If their consumers recognize it, if their investors recognize it, and one other constituency which we fail to talk about every time, employees. Employees are actually dictating more and more what companies do. And particularly companies in the hard-to-abate sectors will tell you it's very hard to get employees, new employees these days. They care about this agenda. So that's my suggestion broadly, Masamba. Think about the impact of all of what we're doing, how we can translate that to actually encourage the caring, sharing and daring.
Thank you so much. And I think this is one element of the innovative business model that I was referring to. We need to come up with business model that create value beyond monetary value. And recognition is one of this type of value.
Yeah, well, I think what creates also value is that we have a healthy Anthropocene, and that's also self-interest, that we don't suffocate ourselves. But okay, that's on a higher level. What we would like to contribute, what we would like to bring into your hub is from our perspective, is actually two things. That we have millions of scientists around the world. We have so many brains. If you could crowdsource all that into the right direction, you create a massive machine of new ideas, so to accelerate the transition that we need to make sure that the businesses get the new processes and so on. So much more directing in a scientific way how this machinery of millions of people works and things would be, I think, a very, very, very useful contribution. And the second thing which I think you should put forward in your hub is that the most cost-efficient way to speed up everything is open access to knowledge. The knowledge which the public system, by the way, financed. The science system is financed by the taxpayer, and we produce 4 million articles, more or less, depending on how you count it, per year, and more than 60% aggregate is behind paywall. So how do you want that a brilliant person somewhere in your local government can pick up the latest state of the knowledge if he can't pay for the access to it? So that it doesn't make any sense at all. So these two elements, I think, are critical vectors in what you want to achieve.
And maybe just building on that, I think what makes what you do so special is that you have, I mean, looking just, you know, on the panel, a diversity of different perspectives, but also diversity of different regions and different insights from different projects that are happening on the ground locally. So maybe also finding a way to scale those into other regions. You know, how can you share that knowledge but then take it into another region, maybe by also, I agree the measurement point is really important, especially to attract the capital in the end, right? But I think the sharing, using that sort of global, that global baseline of the global structures of the UN, I think is really, really important in that context.
Thank you. What kind of recommendation I can make? First, I share what you said on providing knowledge and sharing knowledge for those who cannot afford paying the knowledge. That's number one. Number two, I think Masamba, you said it clearly. We need a holistic and integrated approach. You cannot do this in silo. But remember also that integrated approach means that you put everybody around the table. You can do this only at the local level. Mm-hmm. So localizing the agenda is key for going green effectively. And my first submission will be that if you don't link all this with women and youth, we won't go anywhere. So have a special space in the hub for women and youth.
Excellent recommendation. What you have said in acting locally to address the green transformation is extremely important for us, and this is why the focus of the Global Innovation Hub is at the local level. We are not working at the national level. We are working with cities and some other subnational. As you said, bringing all the right actors around the table and making them work in a coordinated manner, in an integrated manner, is much easier at the local level. So thank you for your contribution. And well noted, the issue of contribution of women and youth, extremely relevant. Last.
Okay, just to add something about the local level. I think citizen data. Cities need near real-time and high-resolution carbon emissions data to potentiate climate action. That's why we are proposing and testing in Portugal the creation of a new player in cities, a new climate actor, which is a sustainability operator. And this is, in fact, an integrated and holistic approach as an alternative to a sectoral approach based on silos. So this operator can manage the implementation of the city's climate action plans, evaluating the level of achievement of carbon emission reduction targets. And they can collect data from different sources, from IoT devices to satellite images, to generate information and knowledge, to support decision-making, the definition of public policies, but also to make available transparent information to citizens. And I think this is very important, working at the local level with people.
Thank you so much. Fully also in agreement with that. The most transformative type of climate and sustainability action are not at the sectoral level, but the potential is at the city level.
Yeah.
Fully agree with what you have said. So thank you all for your contribution, and I would like now to invite our participants to provide a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.